Welcome, guys. Appreciate you guys coming out. This will be a good one tonight. We're going to cover a lot of ground, but again, we record these so you can watch it afterwards, and there'll be a lot of good information. And I'll be sure to pause here and there to let you guys ask some questions. So please do. My name's Chris. Welcome again. Tonight we're going to talk about dual battery systems and you. That's the title of tonight's presentation. So this one is meaty enough that I have to have an outline, so forgive me. But I want to cover some just basic sort of housekeeping of dual battery systems. So what is the purpose of a dual battery system? Why do I care about having an auxiliary battery on my four-wheel drive vehicle? The first thing is to power all of your dang stuff, right? So we all have things when we're in camp, when the vehicle's stopped running, that we still want to power, right? So things like refrigerators, water pumps, lighting for cooking and whatnot, recharging your phones or your GPSs or any of that kind of stuff. So a secondary battery, an auxiliary battery, gives you something that you can, just like an RV or a camper trailer, you have a house battery that runs all of the house appliances and accessories. So a dual battery management system, or a secondary battery system, if you want to call it that, basically protects the main battery, the truck battery, because the last thing you want is to be out in the middle of nowhere, heck, even just up in the mountains, 2 hours away from home, and you got a dead battery in the morning when you wake up. That's not good, right? Because sometimes you don't have cell service and you have a dead battery, and now you're just kind of waiting for some passerby, hopefully, to come by or, give you a jump. So protect and preserve the main battery, power all the accessories when the engine's off and when you're in camp. The other thing that's kind of cool is it also provides, it's a second battery. It's a level of redundancy. It's a duplicate system that you could still jumpstart yourself off of. So if your main battery does go flat on you, batteries do go bad. Even the nice, modern, beautiful batteries that we have today, batteries have a life expectancy, and sometimes they just kick the bucket. So it gives you that level of redundancy. Okay, so that's kind of the three mains. Let's dive into sort of things to think about, considerations when you're contemplating a dual battery system, and then we'll kind of break it down into different ways of going about it. Instead of doing just a huge install like this, we'll talk about some of the more simpler ways to do it as well. So key considerations is, again, consider what electrical needs you have when the vehicle is turned off, when it's stationary, when it's parked, when you're in camp, right? So again, camp lights for cooking, right? So if it gets in the evening, you've been sitting around the fire, you're like, okay, got to cook some dinner, you want some lighting, right? So you will have to be able to power that. Power your refrigeration if you've got a refrigerator, water pumps for your water systems. If you're doing some evening route planning for the next day or so, it's nice to have some work lights or reading lights that you can just flick on inside or out and around the truck or in camp. Scene lighting for, camp chores, setting up a tent when it's dark, checking over some things on the truck, when you get into camp. If you had that kind of annoying rattle when you're going down the trail and you get into camp and it's dark and like, I really need to check what that rattle is because I don't want something to go bad the next morning. So just camp chores like that. Ability to keep, things like radios and GPSs powered on if you need them to be. Then you don't have to start your truck for that. And then, recharging all of the gadgets and things that we bring with us now, camera equipment, cell phones, all kinds of devices. So that list is going to be obviously different on a case-by-case basis. So for you, just make a list. List out, go through your vehicle and just start listing out what are all the electronic things that I'm bringing with me on a trip. Down to like every little flashlight, headlamp, just list it all out. And if you really want to do it properly, have a second column in that table with the amp requirements of each device. And that can be found usually on some kind of label on the back of the device or somewhere on the device. If it's a rechargeable item, like a cell phone or a rechargeable flashlight or rechargeable camera battery, you'll have to figure out what is the amp draw when that battery is recharging itself. Think about how that device is going to be charged. Is it something that I can plug into a USB port and it charges? Is it something that I need to plug into a house main power, 120? Do I need to have an inverter in my vehicle? If I have to charge all the things all at once, do I have enough ports to charge all these things? So once you kind of list all those devices out and include things like refrigerators, if you want to have that on like a wish list, if I want to do a fridge, what is the amp draw of that thing? Any camp lighting, like our area light there, or the light strip that we have in our awnings, or in these guys here. You want to know what that amp draw rating is, and we have that information on the product pages. You want to get that sort of total power requirement, and that'll help you determine what size of battery to put in the vehicle. Because the last thing you want is to, that's my house battery. That's going to last you 3 seconds. This is a little ATV battery or a little dirt bike battery. So not really going to cut it for doing much unless it's being cooked. So that list is very important. The other thing to consider, just like with any packing list, is, gosh, if you're going to all this effort to list it out, might as well have another column of what are the weight and space constraints of those items. Do I have a big old fridge that I need to stuff into the vehicle? Okay, well, how much does that thing weigh? Because at some point, we talk about weight a lot here, but honestly, weight affects absolutely everything on your vehicle, more than most people realize. So weight of all the things, absolutely everything. It's super nice to know that. The other thing to consider too, when it comes to batteries, and I'm not going to go down the road of different chemistries and that kind of stuff, because again, we'll be here till 2 in the morning. But ideal scenario, have very similar or like batteries. One is your start, one is your house battery. If they're the same batteries, and your stock battery, put a nice battery in that position, give it something with like really high cold cranking amps. I would do at least similar chemistries, right? If you're going to have an AGM as your start battery, it's best to have an AGM as your house battery just for efficiency, charging purposes, and again, that redundancy factor, right? So if I've got, and you could have a deep cycle and a, standard, like a group 31 or whatever, but you want that redundancy to be able to jumpstart yourself when you're out in the middle of nowhere. I've done it twice in my life where I've had to jumpstart myself with my dual battery system, and if I hadn't done that, I probably would not be here today, because I was out in the middle of nowhere, literally in the middle of nowhere, no cell service, and my main battery, with a dual battery system, my main battery just died, right? It was just tired and it just gave up the ghost, and that happened to me twice, out in the middle of nowhere. So, batteries, 6 to 9 years. 9 years is pushing it sometimes, but that's about the life of a battery in your car or in your truck. Right, so we kind of have a good idea of what size of battery we need, basically how many amp hours we're going to need for all of our devices. All batteries have ratings of what group size they are and how many amp hours are available in that battery, and depending on the chemistry, you may not have all amp hours available to actually use with that type of battery. And I won't go down that road too far, because that'll take us out into the weeds. But if you guys have questions about that afterwards, I'll be happy to stick around and answer that. So you've got those numbers, you've got those figures. We've now figured out, okay, I know what I need to power. The next thing is, and this is kind of back to your vehicle build plan that we discussed in some of our earlier videos, but you want to figure out where you're going to place everything. And if you are going to do a hard-mounted dual battery system, where the heck are you going to put that second battery? Some vehicles have room under the hood, some don't. Our Jeep JLU behind me here, there's not a lot of room under that engine compartment. It's pretty stuffed full. There really just isn't. You can get creative by moving certain things here and there and stuff another battery in there, but sometimes you just gotta, stash it away somewhere in the truck. But battery's a big, heavy thing. Even if you have a lithium battery, that's still a big thing that you don't want to be a projectile and smack your face on a bump. So batteries must be secured properly. Let's talk about, there's 3 kind of basic systems here that can kind of solve your dual battery solution. The first obvious one here is dual battery management, the hardwired system. This has some pros and cons. Can you see it all right? I'm kind of blocking it, I apologize. But what this gives you is it's a dedicated system that's installed in the vehicle. And the idea with these systems, again, is to be non-intrusive to the truck battery. It's to completely isolate the house battery, but still allow the alternator of the vehicle to charge both, which is a good thing. So a proper split charge system is kind of the way these things are called. It's permanent, it's automatic, it does everything for you. You don't have to sit there and throw breakers and connect wires and do all this extra chores when you get into camp, when you turn your truck off. You can do manual ways of this. We have a breaker and a switch and a plug, but I just don't like doing more chores when I'm taking vacation. I want to make things easy and as efficient as possible. So this just gives you a really nice automatic, no chore way of just having that system do everything it needs to do. And the other thing that's nice about this is this obviously is going to be a custom build pertinent to whatever vehicle you're putting it in, but also to your specific power needs. So this can expand and grow or shrink down to be as simple as possible depending on the setup you have, depending on your specific needs. So these are basically made out of just some kind of key components. And there's even two versions of this I'll talk about a little bit later on. But the premise is you've got either an analog, semi-intelligent solenoid setup, something like this, or you've got a solid state brain that is just looking for different voltage signals from both batteries. And it's going to start allocating power to whatever battery needs the juice. So typically when you start your truck in the morning, right, you've got a quick discharge that happens from the start. When your truck fires up, that alternator starts boosting a bunch of current. This sees that boost. It sees that this had a discharge. It will say, alternator, I want you to charge just the truck battery. I want this to charge up until it gets to its happy, fully charged state, whatever that is in the vehicle. And then once it detects that's fully charged, boom, opens up and sends juice to the house battery next, right? So that's basically how that works in a nutshell. Now, to expand on it a little bit, gosh, it's really nice to have a monitor that shows the voltage of both batteries, so you can kind of keep track of, how full each tank is, to use an example. We have another little gadget, and it's just a simple solenoid. We call it our Start Assist Boost Kit. This is the secret sauce that allows you to effectively jumpstart yourself from your house battery. So what this brain does is when you go to start, right, you've got a switched ignition source here, so it's reading what's happening when you go to your ignition. And if it detects a no start and low voltage in this, it'll automatically, without having you do anything, next time you start, it will have connected these two batteries together, so you're actually now able to start yourself off your house battery without getting out of the driver's seat, right? You're just turning the key a second time. So that's what that's really the sexy part of this little kit. It also gives you doubles the effective boost output of this, so you can really get a nice healthy charge quickly initially, right? So it goes from a 40 amp charge to an 80 amp charge, which is really nice. And these systems can expand and get more and more complex. There's a lot of brands out there that just add lots more and more features. And you can work in other accessories into a system like this, like solar and whatnot, or like a shore power plug. Lots of ways you can go about it. So that's a split charge system in a very simplistic nutshell. All right, so the next way to go about it is this portable battery box. Pros and cons of this little guy. The big one, it's portable. I'm not doing a permanent install in my truck. I have something that I can throw in the vehicle and run my accessories when I need it to, and then take it out of the vehicle when I'm going to work on Monday. So very portable. This usually is the least expensive option in dual battery systems. It's also going to give you basic connectivity. So you've got some 12 volt ports, you've got USB ports. On the side, you have Anderson ports for higher amp accessories and or the acceptance of solar panels. The problem is, this, again, does everything automatically for you. This you're going to have to recharge somehow, some way. You're going to have to do a chore. So not a big deal, but you just need to be able to keep this thing charged. And that's where, solar comes in. That's one way you can go about charging it. Another way is, portable little gas generator. And again, you do have, you're limited to whatever ports are on this, which is, we have a good spread of the most common, USB and cigarette lighter ports and Anderson. But if you need more, then that's where a custom setup would come in handy. So capacity constraints on this is the size of the battery that can actually physically fit in the box. Now you can have different amp hour rated batteries that can still fit in here and you're good to go. You can put smaller batteries in there if you really wanted to, but that's as big as the box is. Now a battery that size, it's about a group 34 battery size, is typically plenty for most 12 volt requirements for most folks. But, that's as big as the box is. That's again where going to something that's a little bit more custom to whatever your needs are. If you have a lot of power requirements, so if you do video production as a day job and you've got a lot of equipment that needs a lot of charging, you may have 2 house batteries, 200 amp hour Battle-Born lithium batteries, right? So you've got 200 amp hours of sauce that you can work with to recharge. Again, that's a specific need, and that's where you'd want a specific tool that can be designed for that system. But if it's just simply keeping a fridge going, a couple lights, like our area light or the light off the awning, simple battery box, super easy to do. Supplement with some 12 volt during the day, or just have a way to recharge it. And we'll go into that a little bit more in a little bit. The last one is going to be sort of an expansion on this. It's still a battery box. I've got an example of another brand battery box here powering our fridge display. And same concept, it's a battery in a box. However, those usually have a built-in inverter as well. So you've got the ability to have all your power ports running off 12 volt, and you can still plug in, things like camera battery chargers, a blender, whatever, right? You've got house power, basically. You got 120. So having that inverter side is something that's really nice with a portable system. And those are usually lithium batteries, and the portable power generators is what they are called often. We've got one of ours coming here pretty soon. I think in a couple weeks we'll have it in country. But lithium usually gives you a more efficient output of the stored amount of juice that you have in the battery, whereas other chemistry of batteries only let you use a certain percentage of it. But another way to do it. Those tend to be a little bit more pricey than your typical battery boxes. I didn't mention on the portable battery boxes, you have to supply a battery. They don't come with a battery. So that's like the 3 basic ways to go about providing a secondary battery or an auxiliary battery in a vehicle. If you have some accessories that have to plug into 120, I've got this little like bullet blender. It's great for making salsas out in when you're camping, just fresh little things that you need a blender for. And it has to run off of 120. It doesn't draw very much, but you have to have some kind of inverter to run it off of. So you would have an inverter in this system coming off the house battery. Really, the only thing you'd ever want to come off of the truck battery is your winch. Radios, any other accessory, lighting that's not driving related, anything for camp lighting, have it come off the house battery. Because again, the last thing you want is to wake up in that morning and click, nothing. When you're doing a split charge system like this, I mentioned an old solenoid style. It's not really old, it's just a different way of doing it, and this was kind of the first way going about it. You've got solenoid versus, this is called a DC to DC charger. So you've got a solenoid version and a DC to DC charger, and there's some kind of key differences to consider depending on the type of vehicle you have and depending on your power rating or your power needs. So new vehicles have what some call a small alternator. I think the more proper term is a variable voltage alternator. So they're alternators that have, little computer chip brain that's connected to them that is constantly adjusting the voltage level to be as optimum and as efficient as possible. So it's going to boost when it needs to for the main battery and cut back when it sees that the main battery is happy and all well. Problem with smart alternators and them being very efficient is that when it comes to still needing to charge your secondary battery, that smart alternator is fighting you if you've got more of the traditional solenoid systems. Because this is just a solenoid is effectively a switch, right? It's got a little bit of a brain in there that's looking at voltage, and then it throws a switch and connects the two systems, but still keeps them isolated. So this is just looking at raw voltage and throwing a switch, and you may not be getting enough juice to this battery on longer duration use with a smart alternator. That's why a DC to DC chargers, that's why this technology was kind of developed, is because you still needed something that was smart that could say, hey, no, wait, house battery still needs some love, alternator, so I'm going to take whatever current you're going to give me, I'm going to boost the snot out of it so I can give this a good charge. Does this kind of make sense? Basically, just about every vehicle in the parking lot probably has a smart alternator. You can get by with an older solenoid system in your vehicle, even if you have a smart alternator. The problem is you're just never really going to give that house battery a full proper charge when you're out driving. It just doesn't get there because you're just not able to give it enough juice. So oftentimes you'll have to supplement when you get home from a trip and just put that on a trickle charger to bring that up to full. Because if a battery never gets its full charge, especially these, what's called wet batteries, it just starts failing internally and it'll never really have its full life back. So hence why lithium batteries are starting to become pretty popular, because they really don't care. So that's kind of the main difference and the why. So if your vehicle, and I've got some kind of specific figures here. So if your vehicle delivers a constant, 13.9 volts or more, basically if you have an older truck, and older is like, maybe early 2000s and older, then a solenoid system, totally fine. And it'll work like a champ, no issues. But if you've got a newer vehicle, and I can't just give you a specific year cutoff because it completely is determined by the manufacturer and the model and whatever was available when Bob was building your truck on the assembly line that day. But newer vehicles, most of them have a variable voltage, and often the output's going to be less than 13.9 volts, especially after it detects the main battery being charged. The output's going to really drop, and that's where that's going to have some issues. So if you've got a newer vehicle that was made within the last 10 years, just go with the DC-DC. You'll extend the life of your house battery if it's going to be a long-term build. Otherwise, you're going to, every 4 years, probably have to replace this battery because it just will die. Old technology, newer technology, yeah, there's a little bit of difference in cost, so a little bit less expensive, a little bit more simple to put together, a little bit more involved of an install, but in the long run, really the right tool for the job when it comes to modern vehicles. Yeah, there's a little bit of cost difference though. Not a ton, but it also depends on the feature set. There's some really nice DC to DC systems out there that are, I would put in sort of like the luxury realm, where they'll give you, it'll have an additional brain with additional monitors that's giving you all kinds of readouts and a lot of good data. That if you're someone that really likes all that kind of stuff, it's actually really cool. But for a lot of folks, that's all kind of just like, whoa, I just don't care. I just want to be able to charge my thing when I need to charge my thing. That's where this system really is nice, because it gives you what you need at a really good value without stuff that most folks don't need, if that makes sense. This display kind of gives you a good idea of, I would consider it like a minimum requirement for gauge of wire. Any DC to DC controller is going to have its required specifications in the instruction sheet of what it wants to have for wiring. On here, this is, I believe, 10 gauge wire. It might be 8, but I think it's 10. I always like to think, in terms of electricity, I like to think of water and flow and limiting restriction of flow. So, copper's not cheap, so you don't want to go out to your local telephone pole and harvest your own, whatever size, 1-inch diameter copper cable, a little ridiculous. But just look at the cable that's coming off of your alternator going to your main battery. That's probably a good one to go with, right? Because the factory put some effort into designing that to make sure that was the most efficient pipe diameter to send the charge to the main battery. Why not replicate that? But certainly 10 gauge will do it. Slightly larger gauges will do it better with less resistance technically, and there's all kinds of math and equations and stuff that I won't go into because we'll be here till 2 in the morning. Any accessory is going to have those requirements. There's also, like I said, some fuses that you're going to want to put in this system as well that are spelled out. It's got a nice wiring diagram. The good thing is, though, you don't have to be an electrician to do any of this because we can help with that. If you come in and you've done your homework with the list and just saying, hey, here's the stuff I need to keep powered when I'm in camp, we can sit down with you and kind of consult on what would be a good solution that, one, checks those boxes for whatever charge requirements you have, and 2, falls within whatever budget you've got to work with for your vehicle. So it's got to make sense for you, and that's why we have several options to go about it. But we're happy to do that, and we can definitely do the install here in house and consult you on that. And we install everything that we sell, so we can help you with that. So it's daunting, but we're here to help. And our customer service team, if anybody watching online, if you want to ring up and you've got questions, we can address that as well, get you taken care of. Right, so let's talk about alternate ways. My truck's turned off, right? I'm in camp. Maybe I want to stay here for 2 or 3 days. So we're now base camping a bit. We're not traveling each and every morning to a new spot. We're going to base camp and just sit here. We've got a good fishing hole. We just want to sit and enjoy this place for 3-4 days, whatever. How do I keep this battery charged up? Now, the easy answer is, well, you got to start your truck, and you got to run your truck for about an hour, and then maybe it'll put enough juice in to recoup whatever discharge you had, right? Typically, it takes about 5 hours of driving to charge up a a house battery from a typical night's usage of accessories. That's fridge, water pump, camp lights. 5 hours of driving. That's a fair bit. That doesn't mean that this battery is not going to last you more than one night. Oftentimes you can get, depending on what you're doing with it, a good 3 nights worth of use out of a battery before it's, not cutting the mustard anymore. So, but people don't realize, just starting my truck for half an hour to top off that battery, it really is not going to do a whole lot. It'll put some juice in there, but it's not going to hold a good level of charge. It'll fall off a cliff pretty quickly. So 3 to 5 hours really is a minimum to get any kind of results. So the last thing you want is to be sitting in camp and having to run your truck for 3 to 5 hours. That's kind of pointless. Now I'm burning fuel, and I know that I want to be here for a few days. Do I have enough fuel to burn sitting there, running my truck? Do I want my truck just running for 5 hours in camp? No. You want the peace and quiet. You want to enjoy where you're at. So really the 2 big ways to recoup a discharge in a house battery is solar or a little putt-putt generator. There's just really no other ways to go about it. There just isn't. That's practical. So having a solar, a complementary solar kit is a great way to keep a dual battery system and your base camp running smoothly and happily. Now, with anything solar, you got to obviously have a sunny day, right? If it's a cloudy day, you're going to pull a little bit out of the sky, but not a whole lot. So the other thing is you want to be able to, with a solar panel, you want to keep it aimed at the sun. So unless you have like some solar position calculating system that and a rotisserie that your panel's on and keeps track with the sun, using all kinds of clever gadgetry, you do have to, every hour or so aim your solar panel because you want it at optimum pointing at the sun, and that'll keep your battery topped off. Typically, it depends on your power usage, but on a typical build, you've got a fridge and a bit of camp lights and that kind of thing. A 200-watt panel is plenty to keep up with just about any fridge. The 120s can get by, but it depends on the type of trips that you're doing. If you're doing a lot of long base camps where you're there for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days in a single spot. Yeah, the more solar panel real estate you have, the more juice you're going to be able to capture and put into that battery. One other thing I wanted to bring up with these dual battery systems is when you're designing a system for your vehicle, think about how you use the accessories in and around the vehicle and where you'd want power ports, right? You may want a couple power ports, additional power ports in the cabin area. You may want some additional power ports in the rear cargo area, right, where your kitchen setup is. So definitely think about where you want to charge things, how you want to use that power. And again, that's where having a true split charge system can be really nice, because you can customize where those ports are versus just having them in a dedicated box that's in one spot. Another thing to consider is the wiring. When you're wiring in one of these systems, you're dealing with a fair amount of amperage that's going through these wires. You don't want to have a truck fire. So take the time, loom everything, anchor down everything, make sure things aren't chafing on stuff. Just give everything nice, clean, smooth pathways throughout the vehicle. You can oftentimes follow existing factory wiring, but have it in a separate loom. You just don't want a wire to chafe on something and then start welding your vehicle unintentionally. There's a YouTube video that's been going around a long time of a guy whose Jeep caught fire out in the middle of nowhere, and it was a 12-volt issue. Most vehicle fires are going to be because of some 12-volt issue that ignites something, either some kind of fuel source, right? Either fuel, oil, plastic, whatever. So wiring is only going to be as good as the time and effort you put into it. It's wiring your system is one of those things where you're either going to just absolutely hate it the first 5 minutes you're into it, or you're going to be one of those weirdos like me that actually finds it quite soothing and satisfying, right? But I'm also that kind of person that will take a week to do my own install, because I'm so meticulous and I want it to be dead flawless without any issues. I've had my dual battery system in my truck for 10 years now without a single issue, knock on wood, but it's because I just took the time to really just solder all my connections. I didn't really crimp much of anything. Everything's soldered. I use marine grade heat shrink, protecting everything, keeping things waterproof and sealed, looming and shielding everything properly, anchoring everything down, making sure wires aren't chafing. It's so crucial. Now, you got to be that kind of a person to be able to do that yourself. You don't want to skimp on the wiring side. So that's where if that's something you're just like, look, I just don't want to do that. That just sounds horrible and miserable. Totally respect it. Or if you just don't have the time, no worries. Find somebody that can do it for you. Go to a reputable shop. It is something that takes time, so you're paying for labor, but that time is reliability. The time spent on doing it right is the long-term longevity and reliability, and the fact that it will prevent a vehicle fire. So, one other fun instance that I ran into having a dual battery, this happened to me once, and ever since then, I haven't had to use it again, but ever since then, I carry some 1/8" welding rod, or a few sets of rods in my truck, and some just extra bits, to stitch things together. But with 2 batteries, plus a battery from your buddy's truck, you can use your jumper cables. And I recommend doing some research before you just go out and do this. You have to connect them in a certain way. But you can actually do some pretty dirty welds out in the middle of nowhere. If you've got a tie rod that broke on you and you need to splint it with a old fence post or something that you found, you can do it, and it'll save you from walking home. With 3 batteries. Now you're going to get like about a 1/4 of an inch of weld, and then you're going to have to pull a battery out, put it in the truck, let it charge, pull it back out again, stick it down, get another 1/4 to 1/2 inch of weld, and just keep kind of hot swapping batteries, because you don't want to kill a battery. But the nice thing is if you have a dual battery system, you've already got 2 out of the 3 batteries that you need. You just need another vehicle, another buddy, and you can do it. I've done it once in the field, and ever since then I was like, a few sticks of 1/8" welding rod, 6 of them. I have in my toolkit, my spares kit, a piece of flat stock and a piece of angle, because I figure with that I can splint together, a tie rod, which is going to prevent you from driving home. I do carry a spare tie rod too, but you know what I mean? You never know. Little things like that, you know, with the dual battery system that you wouldn't normally think about. But it's that redundancy. It's just another level of security and redundancy when you're out in the field. You know, if you pop your hood open and you see how secured and well loomed and protected all the wiring is in your engine compartment from the factory, that's because they don't want your truck burning down when you're out in the middle of nowhere. They want it to be reliable and safe. At least at the minimum, take that amount of effort when you're doing it yourself. Because when you're going down horribly washboarded roads, everything's moving and shaking, and the last thing you want is that wire just to rub through the shielding, and eventually now it's arcing and creating fireworks somewhere in the chassis of your vehicle, and next thing you know, oh, I'm driving a giant marshmallow. I'm on fire. That's not a good day. I haven't seen it happen in person, but I wouldn't want it to. I've seen some wiring that I've seen some wiring where I looked at it and said, oh, that's a fire waiting to happen, because people just don't take the time to do it properly. The other thing too is when you're mounting that secondary battery, right, you've got another set of battery posts that need to be shielded. So, you know, a lot of guys will try to stuff a second battery underneath the hood, and that's where mine is in my truck. But depending where you're at, your hood may not be contoured enough to allow clearance, you know, for those terminals. And if you get a battery strap that starts loosening up ever so slightly, and you get a terminal that bounces and touches the hood, that's a nice little spark and toasted marshmallow that could happen. So, you know, insulate and protect all the battery terminals. You just don't want a truck fire. It's not worth it. Really, having a dual battery system comes down to just improving your backcountry experience. You're able to have a more worry-free experience keeping a fridge running so you have fresh and healthy food, having camp lights running that you're not worrying about your main battery dying, being able to recharge your accessories and your gear, you know, having a water pump and a water tank system on board. These are all just luxuries that just make being out in the backcountry better, a nicer experience, and allows you to be out there for longer duration because you're quite a bit more self-reliant. The other nice thing that's kind of cool is, you know, if you live up in the hills a bit, we've got, where we live, occasionally power goes out quite a bit. And so, you know, having my truck that's got a fridge with a secondary battery running, that's great in emergencies. I mean, what a great thing to have if you lose power at the house. If you're a fisherman, mountain biker, kayaker, hiker, and you love just getting out in the outdoors, and your vehicle's kind of your base camp when you go out and play and then come back to it, go out and play again, come back to it. Gosh, how nice is it to come back to a vehicle that you know is going to have a healthy battery when you need to restart it, but you're going to have, again, fresh food, some water on board to take a shower, and just have a nice, comfortable time out there. So that's really the kind of the why, right? It's just really to make a better experience. Sort of go back through some kind of key points here as we kind of wrap this up. Consider the items that you want to have and use when you're out, right? Is it lighting for your while I'm in camp? Is it keeping things recharged? Is it running a fridge? Whatever. Consider that. Make a list. I mean, make a list of everything. And even with, you know, like we're all going to have a headlamp and a flashlight in our truck, right? So instead of having to carry, you know, bricks and packs of, you know, disposable batteries, get some rechargeables. Put rechargeables or have devices that are rechargeable that you can just recharge off your house battery that's getting, you know, topped off by the sun. You know, same thing with a fridge. You know, if you're out base camping and you're making great meals out in the middle of nowhere out of ingredients coming out of that fridge that's being topped off from the sun, I mean, that's kind of nice, right? Allows you to be off grid for a little bit longer. It just allows you to have longer trips and a little bit more flexibility in what kind of trips you want to do. Even if it's going to, you know, some of the big national parks or whatever, you can kind of get out there and get stuck into it and really enjoy these places and not have to worry about rushing back into town or driving a bunch to keep the battery charged up or running in, you know, to town to find ice for the ice chest. You can just be out there and just enjoying where you're at and exploring and seeing the backcountry. So yeah, having a way to keep things powered is crucial. Most vehicles, most modern vehicles nowadays, they're starting to catch on, right? A lot of vehicles are coming with usually a low wattage inverter built in, right? So you have a little bit of that functionality. They're all going to usually have power ports in the back cargo area. The problem is modern vehicles, again, to protect the main battery, those things are usually on a timer or won't work unless the truck's running. So I don't actually know of too many vehicles that are still combustion powered that will run their inverter without the vehicle engine running. It's just, you kind of just need that to keep it running. And then most power ports that are in the back of most modern vehicles, those usually time out after 15 minutes or 30 minutes, depending on what the manufacturer specified, but those things usually just automatically shut off. So if you're thinking, well, I've got a 12-volt port in the back of my rig, I can plug a fridge in, I'm good to go. It just runs off of the truck battery, no big deal. I got a solar panel keeping that topped off. What you'll find out is when you get out there, you're like, why isn't my fridge running? It's because that factory circuit, they time out after usually 15 minutes. And that's, again, to protect the main battery. So having a secondary power source is so crucial for longer duration trips that is isolated from the main battery. And again, we got 3 ways to go about it, depending on how complex or how simplistic your needs are. That's something that we can certainly help with. So anyway, thank you guys for coming out. This is a lot. Please post questions in the comments. We're happy to answer any questions you may have in the comments, and happy to answer questions or help consult through a system if you're considering a dual battery system. So thank you guys.